Last night you stepped outside for a moment just to get some air. Everything felt normal at first. The faint hum of distant life, the soft movement of leaves, the quiet that usually feels comforting. But then you noticed something strange. There were birds around you perched on branches, rooftops, wires. Not flying, not making a sound, just there, watching, not in a dramatic way, not obvious. But enough to make you feel it, and for a second you told yourself it was nothing. But then you realized none of them were moving, and the silence around them felt different. Here's what most people don't realize: when birds gather and become completely still like that. Especially when you're nearby, it's not just about what they're doing. It's about what your mind starts doing in response. Because this isn't just about birds being quiet. It's about what happens when multiple things around you suddenly stop behaving the way you expect. And this is where it gets interesting. The first thing you notice is the stillness. Not just one bird, but several, all at once, no fluttering, no shifting, no sound. That kind of stillness stands out immediately. Your brain is constantly scanning for movement, especially in living things. Movement means life, it means normal. But when living things suddenly stop moving, your brain flags it. It treats it like a signal. Something changed, something is off. Even if you can't explain why, that feeling settles in almost instantly. But that's not the real reason it stays with you. The second thing is the silence between them. Usually birds create a kind of background noise. Chirping, rustling, subtle movement. It blends into the environment. But when multiple birds are present, and none of them are making a sound, that absence becomes noticeable. Your brain expects noise in that situation, and when it doesn't get it, it focuses on that gap. It starts asking questions. Why is it so quiet? What changed? That silence doesn't feel empty. It feels filled with something you can't quite define. Here's what most people don't realize. Silence shared by multiple living things feels more significant than silence from just one. The third thing is awareness of being observed. You might not consciously think it, but you feel it. The sense that something is looking in your direction. Even if the birds aren't directly staring at you, your brain interprets their presence as attention. Humans are wired to detect gaze. Even the suggestion of it activates alertness. Now imagine multiple points of possible attention, all quiet, all still. That creates a subtle tension, not fear exactly, but awareness, heightened, focused. And this is where it gets unsettling. Because now, it doesn't feel like a random moment anymore. The fourth thing is synchronization. They're not just still individually, they're still together. At the same time, that kind of coordination feels intentional even if it is. In nature, animals sometimes freeze in response to potential threats. It's a survival instinct, but your brain doesn't immediately jump to that explanation. Instead, it notices the pattern. Multiple birds, same behavior, same moment. And your mind tries to assign meaning to that pattern. Because patterns that look organized feel like they have a cause. But that's not the real reason it feels so intense. The fifth thing is your own stillness. At some point you stop moving too, you pause. You watch, you listen, and suddenly you're part of that stillness. That's when the moment shifts. It's no longer just observation, it's participation. You're in the same space, sharing the same quiet, and that creates a strange connection. Not direct, not obvious, but enough to feel. Two forms of awareness coexisting without interaction. This is where it gets interesting, because now the moment feels longer than it actually is. The sixth thing is time distortion. When something unusual happens, your perception of time changes. Seconds feel longer, pauses feel stretched. That stillness, that silence, it feels like it lasts longer than it should. Your brain is processing more information than usual, trying to understand what's happening. And in doing so, it slows everything down. The birds might only be still for a few seconds, but it feels like much more. Here's what most people don't realize. The more your brain focuses, the slower time seems to move. The seventh thing is environment awareness. In that moment, you become more aware of everything else. The air, the space around you, the lack of movement, the absence of sound. Your senses sharpen, not because there's danger, but because there's uncertainty. Your brain doesn't have enough information to confirm that everything is normal. So it pays closer attention, and that heightened awareness makes the moment feel more intense than it actually is. And that's when it starts to feel different. The eighth thing is interpretation. After the moment passes, when the birds move again, when sound returns, your mind doesn't just forget it. It replays it, it tries to make sense of it. Why were they all still? Why was it so quiet? Was it just coincidence, or was there something you missed? Your brain prefers clear answers, and when it doesn't get them, it fills the gap with possibilities. Not because those possibilities are real, but because uncertainty is uncomfortable. But that's not the most important part. The ninth thing is what changes afterward. Once you've experienced something like this, you start noticing more. You pay attention to birds differently, to silence, to stillness. Moments that you would normally ignore now stand out. Your awareness shifts slightly, and even if you rationalize it later, that shift doesn't fully go away. The world feels just a little more noticeable, and then comes the final realization. It was never really about the birds being still. It was about what happens when multiple living things suddenly stop behaving the way you expect, at the exact moment you become aware of them. It creates a pause, a break in the normal flow of things. A moment where your brain can't immediately explain what it's seeing. And in that gap, something changes, not outside of you, but inside your perception. Because when something familiar, like birds moving, chirping, acting normally, suddenly disappears, your mind doesn't ignore it. It focuses on it, it questions it, it holds on to it, not because it's dangerous, but because it doesn't fit. And when something doesn't fit, your brain tries to force meaning into it. Even if there isn't any, that's why the moment stays with you, because it wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic, it didn't demand your attention. It simply refused to fade into the background, and maybe that's what made it feel so different. Because in that quiet, shared stillness, you became aware of something you usually overlook. The constant movement of life around you, the noise that fills the space without you noticing. And when that disappears, even for a few seconds, everything feels unfamiliar. So the next time you step outside, and you notice birds around you completely still, completely silent, don't brush it off too quickly. Not because it means something is out there, but because it reveals something about how your mind reacts when the world suddenly pauses. And once you notice that, you don't stop noticing it. If something like this has ever happened to you, where a simple moment felt strangely intense, like everything around you paused at once, share it. Because the more you pay attention to these moments, the more you start to realize it's not the stillness that's unusual. It's how aware you become when everything else stops.